there, I'm Amy and welcome to another Sims 4 speed build. Today we're building a Gothic-inspired Victorian house, which felt appropriately spooky given that we're now moving into autumn in the Northern Hemisphere. The idea behind this house came from my own playthrough of The Sims 4, in which I had a vampire family that needed a new home, so this is mostly built with vampires in mind, which again added a lot to the spooky vibe of it. It was actually designed specifically for Lilith Vitor, who's one of the townies from The Sims 4 Vampires, and then her partner, who is a sim that I made, is going to live in there with her, and then they're going to have 3 kids. So there's a decent number of bedrooms. For the purposes of this speed build, I do only include enough space for 2 children. One will be sort of a newborn, and the other bedroom ends up being designed more for a teenager, just because that's how I ended up feeling like decorating it at the time, whereas for my own gameplay I haven't got to that stage of needing those bedrooms yet, so I just furnished them for this speed build, but in my own gameplay I'll probably end up editing that later. I just got a bit overexcited while I was building it and thought I might as well record building the whole thing, so that's why I ended up doing the bedrooms the way I do, but I think they look really cute, even though there's a huge age gap between the 2 children. I thought it looked really nice, and you could still use the bedroom that I designed in mind for a teenager, for a child as well, so then there isn't such a huge age gap. But again, with vampires, I don't think it really matters since they live forever in the game anyway. For the exterior of the build, I had a reference picture that I was using. It doesn't end up looking a lot like the reference picture just because, as with The Sims 4, there's a lot of limitations on what you can do with it. So I did my best, but there's a lot of the Gothic detailing that I wasn't able to achieve here, though I did try my best. So you can see I've kind of made a bit of a weird tower area where there's a walkway around the edge. I thought that looked really nice, and that was one of my favourite things about the picture that I was using to try and build this. And I think it came out really well in the end. I mostly used the Vampires pack in this build alongside the Castle Estate kit. For the process of the build as well, I do end up cutting a bit of it out, quite a few sections actually, just because it was really complicated to build due to all of the bump outs, and it's not a style that I build very often. I did try to include as much of the process as possible, but still keep it interesting and not show you anything that seemed insignificant or took a while for me to get right. So in those cases, I did cut that out. But hopefully you get the general gist of what I was trying to achieve through the sections that I did keep. There are also quite a few balcony spaces which I include across the build, but I made sure to have each of those covered. Again, just because if you do play in this build with vampires, then though there is something that they can get as kind of a perk, which allows them to go out into the sun, sometimes I don't play with that. So as a result, it's useful for them to be able to go onto their balcony without burning in the sun. So I did include that in a few spaces. There is actually a mod though that I use which allows any vampire sims to go around Forgotten Hollow only any time of the day, and then they don't get burnt. It only works in that world. I can't remember who made the mod either. If you're interested, let me know and I'll try and dig that out as well. But I thought that was quite a useful thing to have in gameplay because Forgotten Hollow is always such a gloomy looking place anyway. It almost feels like the clouds should block any real sunlight that's coming down. And it is such a nightmare because every time you travel with Sims, they'll always appear at the front of the lot or something. So then if they're vampires, they'll just burn away. Or if you play with servos, I've started playing with one in my gameplay. And whenever I travel, because they actually live in Brindleton Bay, not the best place for them to live, given that it always rains in that world. But then they just start breaking down because they spawn at the front of the lot in the rain. Not really ideal. So at least I found a way to fix that for vampires in Forgotten Hollow, but I wish there was a way to protect servos better from the rain. Anyway, the build is starting to come together a bit more now. I'm just adding quite a few pillars in, and I've included a lot of the accent items from the Castle Estate kit, which includes those freezers, I think they're called, the spandrels, and then a lot of the pillars. It looks really cool and gothic in black. I haven't actually used the black items from the Castle Estate kit yet, so that was fun to include. And for the wallpapers, and the doors. Actually, I was a bit unsure on what to use, so I played around with that for a bit. So you'll notice that I just cut into applying the wallpapers. I did originally think about using these black and white doors. I think they're from university, but I'm not actually certain now. It's been a while since I built this. I started it probably about a month or maybe a month and a half ago now. I only just recently got around to editing it because I've been away recently, so most of the videos that have been coming out were just backlogged that I prepared in advance. But I do end up just going for base game doors in the end because I liked the simplicity of them and they felt like they suited the style really well. For the wallpapers, I mostly used the brick from the Castle Estate kit, and then the siding was from Get Together, which again, it seems to work really well with Victorian builds, even though it's more of a Tudor style wallpaper, I suppose. I quite liked it for this build. And again, it added a lot of detailing, which there was so much detail in my reference picture, so I tried my best to get this to look a lot more interesting and just visually appealing. And then I dotted around a lot of red accents because the Sims that I was building this for, they both wear quite a lot of red, and because they're vampires, it just seemed very fitting for probably very obvious reasons. The vampire that I actually have married to Lilith Vitor, who live in this house, was based off Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3. So if you've ever played that, that's kind of the Sim who's going to be living here. Kind of a morally ambiguous couple, or I don't know if Astarion is technically morally ambiguous. I think he's just morally bad. But personality-wise, he kind of suited the storyline that I was going for, so that's why I ended up creating kind of a similar character for this house to marry off to Lilith. And let me know if you play Baldur's Gate 3 as well. I think it's a really fun game, but I haven't progressed that much in it myself yet, just because I find it a bit of a time sponge of a game, a lot like The Sims, to be honest. But unlike The Sims, where I know what I'm doing, it's my first ever D&D style game, so there's a lot to learn, so I don't play it for that much time all at once. I do really enjoy it, I just need to find the time to play it a bit more and learn about it. I'm actually really proud of how this house turned out in the end. It's probably my favourite vampire house that I've built. That being said though, I haven't made too many. The first ever house that helped teach me how to build in The Sims 4 was actually a tiny vampire house that the YouTuber Griffey made. And what I did back before I'd actually started building myself, I kind of followed their video and recreated it for myself in The Sims because I wanted to do make a few edits for my own gameplay purposes at the time. So I didn't want to take their version off the gallery, but I also didn't know how to build. So I kind of just watched their video back, kept rewinding and pausing it and everything, and just recreated it in The Sims 4. And that was a really good way to learn how to build and sort of what features there are and how to use them. So if you're a bit unsure on building, I'd recommend doing something like that. I find it's just really useful to see why or see what things people gravitate towards to make their builds. For the back garden, I did cut out a bit of the landscaping that I did, but I mostly just used the horse ranch bushes because they had the kind of greeny colour that was around in the world of Forgotten Hollow. There's just not a lot of greenery in the Forgotten Hollow debug. And I really wanted to make sure it looked lush, even though it kind of also looks a bit like it's dying in places. So horse ranch was really useful for that. And then I made a bit of a pathway going down into the back garden, which are the stones that are in the Riviera Retreat kit. I just picked a darker swatch for them. And I think they look really nice, so I was happy to be able to use those. At first I was a bit disappointed by that item because there weren't very many swatches to be able to use them effectively and make it look like a naturally forming path, or at least one that's not just the same item placed again and again and again. But looking at it again now, I think it works really well, even though there are just two different types of the stone. I do like that item a lot more than I thought I would, which is good. It's always good to find a kit that is definitely worth the price, and I think the Riviera Retreat kit is. And then that little, is it called an awning? The sort of black metal item in the back garden as well. That is also from that same kit. I love that item, so I wanted to make sure to use it here. I was tempted to use the ivy swatch at first, but I just felt like this one with the kind of the canopy and curtains looked a lot nicer. for the space that I was going for. So that's why I ended up picking that one. And then I just included a bit of an outdoor space for your sim or your vampire sims to sit by the moonlight and have a drink, I suppose, since they don't really eat, or they don't eat at all unless they are able to tolerate it. In my gameplay, actually, I made Caleb Vitor, who is Lilith's brother, if you weren't aware. They're the two of the main townies from the Vampires pack. I made him be a chef, just because I think he auto-selected being a chef in one of the first saves that I had where I met him. So in my head, and because he has the trait of being a foodie, he's just always a chef in my mind. He'd probably enjoy using the kitchen and eating outside under the moonlight here. Plus, I think he can actually walk around in the sunlight already. You don't even need to buy that perk for him. I believe he already comes with it. I might be wrong though, I can't quite remember. Moving inside now, and I wanted to try and make the place look a little bit fancy, but some of the rooms were a slightly awkward shape. So I tried my best to make this kind of border, which is one of the more fancy vampire swatch of the flooring that came with that pack. And then I used just the diagonal flooring to put in between those. I think it looks really effective and just helps to break up the monotony of having the same flooring everywhere. I didn't show building the floor plan just because honestly I kept changing it so many times to add a few more bump outs on the outside while I was doing that and working out where to place the windows. So it was such an endless process, it really wasn't worth watching back, which is why I cut that out. But for the bottom floor, you can see I'm now decorating the kitchen, which is just at the back of the build. So I used a lot of base game here. I didn't end up using the vampires kitchen cabinets just because the swatches that they came in weren't really working for me. I wanted to have the brown or to have the wood swatch, but they just didn't have the colours that I was looking for. There's only 3 swatches on those kitchen counters, which is such a shame. I wish there were a few more on the vampires counters, but the base game ones worked nicely enough. And then the dining room and there's a little bar area just off to the left of the kitchen area. I brought in the red theme quite a lot in here, although I did change my mind a few times about which assets to use. And then the rug that I just put down does end up changing colour. It's still the same rug from Growing Together, but I end up switching the swatch over just because I wanted to use that roses swatch in the living room instead, which I'll show a bit later on. It took me a while to work out how to lay this out. Part of what helped me decide how to have it in the end was just by changing the shape of the small little bathroom that's just off to the side. So I've now extended that a bit and moved across the little bar area with the stools, and I think it looks so much better and works a lot more with how your Sims will flow through. And I just included a few of the base game assets, so the fridge and the stove from base game. I think they're one of the more expensive ones, if not the most expensive ones. But again, it felt like more of a mansion that I was building, so I think that most of the Sims who have this house would probably be quite rich anyway, so I wasn't too worried about that. You may have also noticed as well that the shelves are already cluttered up, but I didn't show that on camera. I do end up changing that a little bit, which is partly why I didn't show it on camera. So to save you seeing me clutter the same shelves twice, I just cut out the first part of it. But you'll see me go back and rearrange a few things just because I wasn't fully happy with it at the time that I did it. And then the curtains that I ended up using in a lot of the spaces are the new ones from Lovestruck. They're the freestanding curtains though, they don't snap to the wall. I did have to use the tool mod in one of the spaces that I added them in just because they were slightly too big, but I couldn't size them down just in game. Problem is though, I was having issues with the tool mod just because I don't think it had been updated since Lovestruck had been released. I had to put it in my game, do what I needed to do with it, and then I took it out again because otherwise I just seemed to have a few issues with it. But thankfully I didn't need to use it too often in this build. I did actually think of adding a wine or a nectar cellar, I suppose, into this build as well, but for a while I couldn't figure out where to put the stairs to go down to it, so I didn't bother including it at all. But if you did download it and could figure out where to place another set of stairs to go into a basement, I think that would be quite a cool thing to include. Plus, I believe that vampires who make nectar can make a special vampire nectar, a bit like spellcasters. I play with spellcasters all the time, so I'm used to sort of the Valerian nectar that they can make. I find it really odd that only the occult that would benefit from the nectar can make the nectar. I'd really love, because I play with spellcasters pretty much all the time, and they're almost exclusively what I play with in The Sims. It would be really nice if they could kind of make their own business and provide the vampire sims with the nectar that's suitable for them and things like that. So I don't really know much about the other nectar types that you can make, but it might have been a fun addition to include here. Anyway, decorating the living room now. I used a lot of the base game furniture here. It's not furniture I use very often, but because it's quite a big room, I really wanted to have a 3-seater, a 2-seater, and then an armchair. It's a real big bugbear of mine in The Sims 4, where in a lot of packs you just kind of get a love seat in this pack, or you'll get a 3-wide sofa and an armchair in another pack, but then there won't be a love seat that would match them, and it's really irritating. So this was the best colour combination that I could find, and it fit the vibe really well. Like I said, they're not sofas that I typically use. Honestly, I generally stay away from base game items just because I often think that they're quite low resolution and not very good quality. Plus the style of them often feels really outdated. But for a Gothic vampire Victorian house, these fancy sofas seemed really suitable, so they were perfect for this build. I was glad to be able to use those. I did also add quite a lot of the Crystal Creations pack in here. I ended up making bringing in the actual item where you can create crystals and jewelry in this build, just because I like the idea of being able to have that for my Sims, and it felt really suitable. Any occults really seem like they'd be really suitable to be able to create crystals and things, so I thought that was a good inclusion. You may also notice as well, I've included a few shelving units around. The one above where the armchair is, just next to the fireplace. I leave it empty. Sorry if that bothers you, but because I was building this primarily with my Sims in mind, for those kinds of shelving units, I often put the collectibles that you can get through gameplay in those. So I didn't want to stock it with crystals from debug because I figured my Sims would go around looking for them. If I already had all of the crystals, it wouldn't be as much fun gameplay-wise. So just something to bear in mind if you wanted to download the build, that they are empty, but at least that's an opportunity for you to add your own gameplay items to it as well. And speaking of which, if you did want to download the build, it is available on the Sims 4 gallery, just under my EA ID, which is AWayfaringFrog. You can find all of the builds that I've put up on YouTube there, aside from the shorts. I think I mentioned that in one of my last videos, but just because I don't find it very easy to upload rooms, especially if you're using platforms and things, so I don't tend to bother putting those on the gallery. But if you ever did want to see something that you've found on YouTube and you can't see it on my gallery, just let me know and I can definitely upload that. You might also notice, just as I'm darting around the build, that a lot of the chandeliers, which are the ones that come from vampires, I've sized them down slightly. I do fix that before I put it onto the gallery. Just while I was playtesting, I realised that they did have actual flames. I couldn't really see it in build mode, so I didn't think it was a problem, but whenever you've sized down an item that's got an animation associated to it, the animation part doesn't size down as well. And because I couldn't see the animation in build mode, I thought it was fine for quite a while until I went to playtest. So I do fix all of those later, so just ignore the fact if you've noticed that they are sized down. They won't be in the main build. In some of the places I just opted for the smaller chandelier. In this little downstairs hallway section by the stairwell, I thought it would be nice to include the organ from Vampires here, so I went ahead and added that in. Again, in my game, Lilith is really into music, so I made a little space for her to be able to do that. There was also a dark cloud in that room. That was just Vlad. He became my tester sim for a while, so he hadn't quite managed to get out of the way by the time I started building again, so just ignore that. He's now back outside where he won't burn to death actually, because I've got that mod that stops him from burning in Forgotten Hollow, so he'll be perfectly fine outside. You don't have to worry about Vlad. Now in the ensuite bathroom, I ended up using this base game marble tile and I thought that looked really effective, so I sort of custom placed that to make it look a lot more interesting, and I thought that worked really nicely, and then just the splashes of red helped to add some colour into this room. I didn't show the small toilet, it just is a toilet and then a separate sink area next to the kitchen downstairs because it was really small and not very interesting, and the video was already getting quite long, so I did skip that out. But the other two bathrooms, this ensuite being one of them, I do show the decorating of those. And they're both quite different, so I figured I'd keep it in sort of keep the decorating that I did in both of them. The main bathroom is in this tower that I added just at the front of the build. I usually find it really difficult to put bathrooms in here, and you could kind of see that the shower tub combo that I included, which is also from the Vampires pack, it kept snapping to something. It refused to be alt placed. It didn't really like it for some reason. I normally only get that problem with round walls, but I was getting them in this one as well for some reason. But there was a lot of space, so I think it worked well in the end, even though it was a funny shape to have a bathroom. Just not having a lot of straight walls becomes really difficult to place certain items, like the individual showers, but just using that shower tub combo, I think, helped get rid of that issue. And I think it looks really good in the end. And then onto the main bedroom. It's not that large. I kind of wish it was a bit bigger, but just due to how I ended up with the floor plan, it's kind of small. But I think it looks quite good in the end. I just included quite a few of the Crystal Creations items again, and then a bookshelf with a few cluttered pieces on the shelving unit just next to this. Also, the bed from Realm of Magic just felt perfect. I really wanted to have a canopy bed just to make it look a bit more elegant, and I didn't really like the colour of the canopies that came in the Lovestruck expansion, even though I was really excited about those. The colours just weren't working with the other reds in the room. It was a bit too bright, so I did end up just opting for this Realm of Magic bed, but I think it works out really well. There is just a lot of black and greys in the build in general, so I think that was fine. And up on the third floor, I do go back to do the bedrooms and the landing on the second floor, but for now, I just kind of had issues with the landing on that second floor, so I got a bit sick of looking at it and decided to come up here. I did fully decorate it, but then I deleted it all and tried again. So if you can see an item or two already down there and wondering sort of why that wasn't in the speed build, that's because I ended up deleting it. So I do show that after doing the top floor. But I just made a bit of an office space here. That sim that I mentioned was kind of inspired off Astarion, ends up being a writer, so I had a vision that this would be his office. And then the fourth bedroom, which is just the other one that comes off of this landing area, that ends up being more of a coffin room rather than a bedroom. So if you did want it to be a 4-bedroom house with actual bedroom furniture and not just a coffin, you could always just remove that section and replace it with your own furniture if you wanted. But at the time, I just thought it would be quite a fun idea to include the coffin, since it is something that came with the vampire pack, so I just wanted to add that up here. I did also have an idea that if your Sims had a butler, maybe this could be the butler's room since it's out of the way. So there's always that option as well if you wanted, but I just wanted to use one of the vampire specific items, so I did. And I think it looks quite nice in the end. Plus, even though Lilith has the aspiration to have 3 children, or at least to train 3 children in the art of being a vampire, I figured a couple of the kids that I end up having in my gameplay, they can just, like, 2 of them can share a room and then the other one can have their own room. So I only really wanted 3 bedrooms for my Sims anyway. I'd be really interested to know how many of you actually play with occults, because as I mentioned earlier in the speed build, that's like spellcasters are the reason that I bought The Sims 4 to begin with. A YouTuber that I watched a lot of at the time, who was by no means a Sims tuber, but he ended up sort of being strong-armed by his community into getting The Sims 4, and that was when I discovered that there are vampires and spellcasters in the game, so I had to buy it. And I just find it kind of, it's not boring, but I really like having the occult kind of vibe going on in my gameplay, so I will always have occults. They can live in a super modern house, but they can still be a spellcaster in my mind, so I have them in every playthrough. So are you the same, or do you just like not play with occults at all? I'd be really curious to know. So now back to that second floor landing, and I really like how this ends up looking. Originally I just put down sort of a sofa, and I think the chess table that ended up going upstairs was down here as well, and it just looked really weird. It didn't make any sense, so I like the fact that there's a gameplay item now with the Crystal Creations desk, and then there's a section to put sort of that Realm of Magic shelving unit is the section to put crystals and things in. Like I said before as well though, I don't put anything in it because I intended to do that in my gameplay, so it is empty, but you can always fill it with your own items if you wanted to. And then around the stairway, that was kind of where I was struggling to fill the space, but I thought including that statue there from the Vampires pack worked really well. So I was glad to be able to incorporate that into the build. And then onto the nursery, I ended up doing this in a very purple colour scheme, just because Lilith, I think, has a purple house, a purple room in her original house in Forgotten Hollow. So because she's the mother of my Sims in my gameplay that this house was inspired for, that's why this became purple rather than red, which is the heavy colour theme throughout the rest of the build. But it was quite nice to be able to use a few of the different items and colour swatches for this. Plus I really like that changing table, which sadly isn't base game, even though it looks like it should be. The dark wood swatch has the sort of purple section for the infant to go on when you change their diaper, so I thought that was a good little extra, an extra way to bring in the same colour. And then in terms of clutter, I brought in quite a few of the base game items. A lot of them you may not recognise as base game. I guess they're still fairly new. They were from when we got the Growing Together update. A lot of new items specifically designed for infants just got added to the game, which was really nice. I love it when the Sims do that. Oh, and speaking of which, at the time of doing this voice recording, we just got the roadmap for September onwards for The Sims 4, so I'm really excited. It looks so cool. I love the idea of the sort of life and death pack that's coming out, and then they mentioned another base game update in that roadmap, so I'm so excited to learn more. Just adding a few more clutter pieces. I really wanted this room to feel kind of tight and cozy, so that's why I added quite a lot of this furniture in, even though it's not all particularly necessary, especially for a newborn. But there is still room to switch out the bassinet for the infant bed or the infant cot for when they grow up. It does still stay very tight, but I managed to do that in my gameplay, so hopefully you don't have any issues yourself. And then for the teenager's bedroom, again, I decided to go for another very different colour scheme in here, so I went for quite a blue one, using this bed as inspiration, which is from the High School Years pack, I think. That one also felt very Victorian and very Gothic, so I really liked that I could include it here. And then I just included a few other items from the High School Years pack, like this wardrobe, the shelving unit, and then I end up grabbing the desk that's sort of designed around the same kind of aesthetic. I do find it really odd though, but when I was playtesting, your Sims can't actually walk past the wardrobe that's at the foot of the bed to get to the other side of it. Because the bedroom's designed for a teen, or I suppose a child, I didn't think it was a problem because I figured there'd only be one Sim sleeping in the bed anyway. But there's just something to bear in mind. Even though I noticed your Sim couldn't walk around it in playtesting, I loved how it looked and there was nowhere else to put the wardrobe, so I just thought, forget it, I'm just going to leave it here. I don't think it's necessary to be able to access both sides of the bed, so hopefully you agree and think it's fine. But I like how it looked in the end, so I didn't want to move it. But now we're coming to the end of the speed build portion of the video, so if you did enjoy it, please be sure to hit that like button. It really does help the channel. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and enable notifications so you'll know when I next upload a video. As I mentioned before as well, you can download this build using my EA ID on the Sims 4 gallery, which is just AWayfaringFrog. And as before, if there's any builds you'd like to see me create on the channel, be it an occult build, or even just like a modern one or a cottage or something, just let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And again, let me know if you play with occults, because I'd be really curious to know how many of you are as obsessed with occult Sims as I am, or whether you prefer to just keep your gameplay a little bit more vanilla. I also did have a bit of an idea of one day maybe bringing out, say, a Not So Berry series and doing a bit of gameplay on the channel. So if you're interested in that, do let me know. Aware that I'm a very small channel, so if any of you did want to see something like that, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but otherwise I'll probably just stick to building for now, since I really do enjoy doing that and I've still got quite a lot of ideas. Always welcome to hear more ideas though, so please let me know. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video and enjoy the screenshots. Have a great rest of your day.